Hi there, this is Lily, and here for another Tip of the Week video. I'm continuing along in the series on gaming and creating character rigs, animation for games, and then being able to import those games into, specifically in Unity in this case, but also works for generic game engines as well. So last week I showed you guys the theory behind how to create a rig for games. So basically, it's really simple. You just want to create different drawing layers and attach pegs to those drawing layers to be able to animate the independent layers. What I wanted to do was actually go back and go over that again, except this time I'm actually going to rig a character for you. And the reason I'm going to do this is because last week I was actually in Seattle and I went to go visit a number of game studios there. And what I realized, or what I learned from that experience and actually getting in and speaking with the game animators, is that a lot of people who will be picking up the technology here to use Harmony for games will probably be coming from an experience where they've either used Flash in the past, or maybe they've used Photoshop, and you really want to learn that rigging piece as fast as you can. And so even though I think what I did last week teaching you guys the theory behind it was great, I think it will be a lot easier for you to learn and pick it up really fast if I just show you how to rig an actual character. And so let's go ahead and get started. And what I did was I prepared this design for this sheep character in Photoshop in advance, because the other thing I realized when I was visiting the game studios is that a lot of people do have the design of the characters done in Photoshop ahead of time, and then they will recreate the drawings in Harmony in Vector afterwards. So in general, personally, I prefer drawing in Harmony because I'm so used to the drawing tools now that I don't like doing design in Photoshop first. So if you are comfortable enough to do all of the design work in Harmony directly, then I would definitely recommend doing that, because it means you don't need to do your drawings twice. When I was speaking with some of the game designers and game animators in Seattle, part of the reason that they told me that they used Photoshop first to do the initial designs was because they liked the drawing tools better than the drawing tools they had available to them in Flash. So they were able to create character designs faster. Me personally, I find that the drawing tools in Harmony are comparable or better for creating game designs because of the fact that you're working in Vector, so you have a really easy way to manipulate the lines and stuff, and then you don't have some of the drawbacks that you do when you're working in Flash. So that's just my personal touch. But I wanted to make sure that you know that you can import drawings in from Photoshop, and you can also import drawings in from Illustrator into Harmony if you want to use those as reference, or even if you just want to rig them directly. You can rig a bitmap image in Harmony directly if you want to. So just a couple of notes about importing Photoshop files in. The most important thing to understand is that you do have the ability to bring in separated layers and preserve those layers separate within Harmony as well. The only thing to keep in mind is the naming convention and the way that you group things. So if I import this character in, it's actually going to create a new layer in Harmony for each group that it finds in Photoshop. And then if you have multiple different drawings within a single group, like the two body drawings here, so we're experimenting with some different styles for the body. So if you have two different drawings there, then what it will do within the same group, then what it will do is it will put those as frames. And the reason that we did it this way is because Photoshop does support its own animation system, and the way the animation system works in Photoshop is by having different layers, and then each layer becomes a frame in your animation. So if you do want to import Photoshop animation, you can also import Photoshop animation, which is pretty cool. So just keep in mind that if you do want to keep it as a separate layer, each layer should be in its own group. And then the way that it will name the layers when they're imported into Harmony is it will be named, first of all, starting with the name of the file and then the name of the group. for the layer, and then you'll have the individual drawing name within there as well. To create a drawing and put it inside a group, it's super easy. You just create a new layer, and then I have my drawing in this layer, and I'll just move this layer outside the group. So let's say this is my I don't know, curly hair layer. So I can label this curly hair, and then I can put this one inside a group, and then if I label the group curly hair, then the layer name will be reflected as curly hair because it's the group name. So then now I can save this file just as a regular old Photoshop PSD. There's nothing special to do apart from the layer setup. And then if I go now into Harmony Stage, then within here I can now import that image in. I did choose to resize my canvas in here to make it a square canvas, just because I know a lot of people when they're working in game animation want it to be square. So if you go to Scene and then Scene Settings, this is where you can adjust the resolution of your camera. It doesn't necessarily really matter that much when you export those drawings out, because when you export them out, it will take the drawings and then compile them onto a sprite sheet. But it's still, it's still nice to have that as a reference. So I just created a new one by putting in 2048 by 2048. And then you can always save that by hitting the save button. You can save it and then just give it a name. So I called it game, and then I can always go back to that one again later. So at this point now, if I want to import that image in, I can just either click on the Import Images button at the top there, or go to File, Import Images, and then I can select that file there and browse for it if you need to browse for it, but I had already browsed for mine, so I've got the file loaded in there. And then I'll just create the layers based on the file name, and you can either choose to create it as or keep it as the original bitmap. If you keep it as the original bitmap, it means that you will not be able to edit the file within Harmony, but you will be able to edit it in Photoshop and update the file. However, if you choose to import it as a Toon Boom bitmap, then you will be able to edit it with the Toon Boom's bitmap editing tools. And then if you convert it to a Toon Boom vector drawing, this wouldn't really make sense in this case, because that's for when you're importing a series of scanned images that only have the lines, because you can choose black and white to make the black of the lines, black vector lines, and then white to make the white transparent. And then gray is similar, except instead of the lines being a solid black vector line, it will be a textured vector line. But so if I want to, I can import it as a Toon Boom bitmap, or I can keep it as original bitmap. In this case, I'll just keep it as original bitmap because I plan on redrawing in vector so that I can take advantage of the vector tools anyway. So. Okay, so now if I click OK, it gives me the option of keeping it as separated layers or of putting it down to a single layer. So I'll just leave that on separated layers and click All Right, or OK. And then now you can see how it imported these in as as separate elements there. So for each element, you see that it named it the name of the Photoshop file, and then an underscore, and then the name of the group that each layer was in, and then the individual drawing. If I just check it out here in my library, then the individual drawing is just assigned a number there. So it's assigned number 1 because it doesn't have a specific, the first is the first drawing in that layer. You notice that because I had the second body there turned off, it did not also import it. If I have it turned on and I save it again, and I just redo that import, let's just undo that a few times and then do it again. Then now you see how it kept those two different bodies. Okay, so this is the final design now of what I want my character to look like. So if I want to redraw this in Harmony, I'll just show you a few tricks while drawing in Harmony here. So I'll create all the same drawing layers that I need to work with, and I'll just leave them as totally vector. Of course, like I mentioned last week, the advantage of keeping it as vector is that you do then have the possibility of rendering it out as large as you need to. So even if you have to make a poster and you need to put these characters on a poster, you can still extract back out the artwork in vector so that you can use it. So I'll just create the different layers. Let's say curly hair. I guess I'm keeping that curly hair layer even though it wasn't in the original design. That's okay. I'll do the front eye. I'll do the back eye. I'll do the head, the body, the tail, and then the feet. So I've got the front foot or leg. Got the front back leg. Got the back front leg. I know I have a weird naming convention here, but it makes sense in my head, so I'm just going to go with it. Okay, so I accidentally created 2 tail layers there, so I'll just delete one of them. And I'll just get rid of the original drawing as well. So all the setup stuff that I set up last time is still true. I did turn off in the preferences that animate using animation tools that's in the control. So I turned this one off in my preferences so that all new layers that are created don't have that turned on. And I do that because I like to just keep the drawing layers for drawings only, and then I'll keep the keyframes on the peg layers. So when you're drawing, you can draw either in the camera view or in the drawing view. Just so that you know, the drawing view enables you to isolate out just the individual drawings that you're working on without seeing any keyframe animation on them. And I'll show you again later on when we're animating why that's useful. But if you turn the light table on, it will show all of the other layers so that you can have a preview of what they look like. If you do turn off the visibility of those layers, then they don't show up in your light table view there. So just be aware of that. So for example, if I'm drawing everything else and I just think that body's in the way, I can just kind of get rid of that body for the moment to make it easier for me to draw the other stuff. Now, when drawing for games, it's always, or in general, in vector, it's always preferable to use the pencil lines. So if you're using the pencil tool, then basically what the pencil tool enables you to do is to have a line. You can still have a line that supports thick and thin if you want to. If you don't want it to have a thick and thin line, you can also go into your tool properties there and select a brush of a fixed width as well, and then you always have a line of one thickness. So it's really up to your personal preference of what the style of your game is and what you want it to look like. So I'm going to keep mine on a fixed width for this. So you can freehand draw with your pencil tool, and you can also let's go back. I'll keep everything at 10. And then you can also draw with your line tool. So I'll also keep my line tool at 10 as well to keep a nice consistent line. So often when we're drawing stuff, we want to, especially if we're following a model, you might just want to pop together some lines and turn on snapping, so you quickly snap things together. Just like every other software, if you hold down Shift, it will make a straight line, and actually it makes a straight line in increments. So I can come in here then, and then if I want to turn on snapping, I'll turn on snap to contour, and then when I do that, as I get close to the edge of a line, it creates a little blue dot, so I know that I can snap those together. And then here, if you notice that the lines are actually not quite straight, then I can always nudge the elements. You can nudge with the arrow keys, so I can nudge up and down. If you want to nudge in larger increments, you can hold down Shift and then nudge it. So I'll just nudge it just a little bit just to make this perfectly square. And then now I can take this perfectly square one, and with the contour editor allows you to select points and move them like I just did, but it also allows you to select a line and just drag. So if I click and drag on the line, now I created a nice curved line there, and I can just come in and paint this black. So that works out just fine for my back leg, but I just realized I drew the wrong one because this is the back leg, so that's actually this leg here. And then if I like this drawing, I could even just select the individual drawing elements on there with my select tool. So that's my black arrow, and then do a Control C or a Command C for copy. Go on the back front leg, and then I can paste that. We always do a paste in place. Like some softwares, it pastes it like in the middle of the grid. We always do a paste in place unless you do the paste on top of something that already exists there, in which case it pastes it slightly off to the side, but then you can always use your Shift and arrow keys to get it back in exactly the same place. So if I wanted to start in exactly the same place and then maybe drag with Shift held down to drag it in a straight line, then you can use some of those tricks as well. So I'll just get rid of that extra one. So now I'll go over to the other leg here. I'll paste that one out. Remember, it's pasting it in place where it was before over there. So this is the front back legs. That'll be this leg here. Just get that in position, and then I can do the front leg, which is this one here, and then I'll just get it over there. So I'm overdrawing a little bit from what the original model had, but it's going to give me some extra room to do some cool stuff with those legs. So now if I go over to the tail, this is a good chance for me to freehand draw. I'm using a pen of the same size there, and then I can just kind of drag over there and even get some of the nice curly, fun shapes. And if at the end of the line I'm worried about whether it's connected or not, you can always use your contour editor to adjust those lines. And if you select a point or a line in there, you can select the line and then hit delete, and it will just remove that extra stuff. And if I really want to make sure that these are connected, then I can make sure snap to contour is on, and then I can just select one of these contour points and snap it into the other, and now it's really fully connected in, and I'm ready to paint this guy. And a lot of the times in games, well, actually, I'll return to this later. I'll get to the painting of this later. I'll just leave it like lines for now. And now I'll turn on the body. So I want to turn on the reference body, which I had turned off before. So I can use that as my reference. And then when I come in here now, when I'm using something like the ellipse tool, it kind of makes sense, but we do have the ability to hold down Alt and Shift at the same time to draw from the center of the circle. So if your reference drawing did also have like a center marker on it, then you could very easily get in the right position. And if you need to do some small tweaks, then you can do those small tweaks and nudge them around just like you can nudge in other software. So get that right in spot. And then now going for the head, I will do a center. Let me just turn off the snap to contour. I'll do it from the center, and I'll hold down Alt, but I won't hold down Shift. If you hold down Alt and Shift at the same time, it gives you a perfect circle. If I just hold down Alt, it kind of does it from the center, and it just makes it a little bit easier for me to come in here with my select tool and then select that and sort of reposition it in the right spot. And if I want to just get it down like that and then just pull the sides out like that, now I'm all done. Since this one's just black, I'll just paint it in right away. And then I can turn that off so that I can see the other layers as I draw them. So going for the back eye now, I'll do a very similar thing. I'll just hold down Alt, get it in position there. And I can go to my color library here and select my white. I'm just going to get rid of all of the other colors that I don't need and paint this in with my white. It's going to be a solid white, so it makes it super easy. And actually, even before painting that in with white, if you have the pupils, actually no, yeah, I'll do it like that. So I'll paint this in with white, and then I'll turn off this eye, and I'll make the pupils on their own layer. So it wasn't set up like that in the original sort of reference. So it wasn't set up that way in the original drawing, but I will do it that way in the actual one so that I can reposition the pupils using only a keyframe, and it will also keep the size of those drawings on the sprite sheet really small. So it's there's no disadvantage to doing things on separate layers. It's not like you're optimizing necessarily your sprite sheet by having less layers. It's just that you want to make sure that you're not using too many drawings as a total. So if you can create as few new drawings as possible, then it's just going to be advantageous for you as you go forward. Okay, now I'll select this pupil and copy and paste it into the front pupil, but move it over to the side like so. And I might make it slightly larger because the front eye is just a little bit bigger. And some people ask me about instancing, by the way. So if I would like to reuse the exact same eye, so I've already drawn the back eye. If I wanted to reuse the same eye, I can actually select that layer and I can clone the selected layer. And if I clone it and I select drawings only, then I will be able to reuse the same drawing but have different timing. And then if you clone it and use drawings and timing, then if I blink one layer, then it will also blink the other. Just to give myself maximum flexibility, I'll clone the drawing only. And then when I'm actually repositioning this one, I'll reposition the layer. So let me get rid of this front eye then, because I'm not going to use that, and I'll rename this one front eye. And then I'll reposition that layer instead of using my select tool, because if I use my select tool, keep in mind I'm modifying both of those drawings now because they're cloned. So I can't use my select tool to move that drawing over. So instead of using my select tool, I'll use my transform tool. But I've set this particular layer up so that the transform tool doesn't work on a drawing. I can always turn on animate using animation tools on that drawing and then move it over and even scale it up a little bit so that it fits where that eye is going a little bit better. Sorry, my pivot point's off to the side, but I'm not going to fix it right now. And then I can, after that's repositioned, I can actually come in here and turn it back off again. So if you turn it off again, it means that there's a keyframe on that layer that's giving it its default sort of resting position, but I do not have the ability to accidentally, like remove the keyframe. If I use my shortcut for remove keyframe on that layer, then it actually doesn't do anything. So it allows me to do a full reset without messing anything up. So if you do want to instance it, that would be the way to do it. Just to totally prove that it's instanced, if I make a change to one of those, you see that it happens on both. So if I, make a weird curlicue above, like maybe he's got like a weird eyebrow or something, if I add that on there, you see that it adds it to both sides. And then it is transformed over and scaled up. If you wanted to flip it over, then you would have to flip it with this, let's say, animate using animation tools on. And then you could take your transform tool and then just do a flip horizontal. It's going to flip it around your pivot point, which is why it's like all the way over there. But then if I just reposition that in there and then turn off animate using animation tools again, then you see how I've now got that one flipped over. So if I had something that needed to be sort of symmetrical, then you could get that very easily using an instance drawing. So I'm actually just going to remove all that extra stuff because I don't want that little crazy eyebrow thing there. And then now I can just finish up this whole thing by doing the curly hair piece, which I added at the last second there in my Photoshop file, just for fun. Okay, so now the last thing I want to do, let me get rid of all of my reference now. I don't just want to turn it off, I actually want to remove it just because it's actually going to get in my way if I leave it there sort of forever. And then I want to come in and paint the body and the tail and talk to you about a couple other things at the same time. So the reason I left the body and the tail for last is because I want to paint those with a gradient. And then the other thing is the order of the layers. So I need to reorder these layers so that those eye elements are in front of the head. And then the easiest way to reorder them is simply to drag them above. So that I drag, you can see the little blue line that appears there that enables me to reposition those. And now the eye is in the right spot. And then hopefully the front eye is always in front of the back eye, just in case they end up overlapping at some point. And then the tail should be behind the body. And then the head should be in front of the body as well. You don't see that it doesn't work right now because of the fact that the body is not filled in. But if they're in the wrong spot in the end, you will get yourself into trouble. And then I'll just stick those legs also behind the body, maybe also behind the tail, and then put that curly hair in front of the head. So not as a child of the head, but in front of the head. Okay, so now I've got the layers repositioned the way I want. I'm going to come in here and then add a new color pot in my color window here. And then I'll just double click on it to edit the color. And then it's directly in here that you can create a gradient out of it. So I will create a radial gradient. I like to turn my color wheel over to value and then just go from there. Seems to make a lot more sense to me. And then I'll just I'll actually reposition these guys so that I have the white on the inside and then the gray on the outside. And then I can save this as the body gradient. And then I'll add another one that I'll make a linear gradient and then just call that the tail gradient and go with that. So coming in here now, I can paint with my paint bucket using the body gradient and just sort of position that. And then the center of the gradient ends up where you paint, where you actually click. So I want the center to be kind of where the head is. And then if you need to make changes to the colors, you can actually make the changes sort of directly in here, which is quite fun. So if it's not dark enough, I can come in here and darken it up a little bit, you know, and adjust where the colors are showing. So if I want the white to be, I want it to be a more sudden change, then I'll just have the white extend out like that. And then just sort of fade it out a little bit like that. So you can make as many of those changes directly within, I don't want it quite that close, something like that. So it's got a little bit of a highlight there on the back. So you're making those changes directly within the gradient. If you do need to change the positioning of the gradient, then you can come in hidden underneath your contour editor tool. There's a tool called Edit Gradient Texture. If you then click on a gradient, then you see the matrix that defines this gradient, and you can always come in and reposition how the gradient is stored within that space. And by default, when you do paint and you click, then it has a default sort of size for how big that gradient is going to be. If I wanted to store this color gradient and reuse it somewhere else, I can also do that. If I select on the color, if I select the drawing, the fill of the drawing using the select tool, then there's something here called store color gradient. And then after I store it, if I wanted to say go and paint the tail and have it follow exactly the same position as the rest of the gradient, then I can paint it there as well. But I don't actually want to do that because I have a separate gradient that I want to use on my tail, and I want to kind of get it positioned that way, and then come in here with my Edit Gradient Texture tool, and then I can reposition it and sort of just squash it down a little bit so that I have a bit more of an immediate change there on the tail, and do something like that. So just because I wanted to have a linear gradient on that and a solid gradient on the other. So that's actually working pretty well for me. If you wanted to also do something where like you want to have a different region, so let's say just within the tail here, I might want to paint an invisible stroke that I can use as a boundary. So actually what I'll do is I'll undo the painting of this tail, I'll leave it empty. If I come underneath my paint bucket here, I can draw a stroke. Now a stroke is a freehand line. Sorry, just gave me an error saying that I can't see the stroke. If you go to View, Show Strokes, which has a shortcut of K, then this shows you the invisible lines. So you can see the pencil line is defined by a center contour. So I can actually come in here and draw an invisible stroke that I can then use as a boundary. So maybe I want to have something painted across like that. So let's say that I want to duplicate this tail gradient but make it a little bit darker. So, you know, I'll take it down there a notch, and I'll even take the white down a notch. Then I can come in here and I can use the paint tool. You can also use something called paint unpainted. So if you use paint unpainted and you paint the tail gradient in the light color first up there, and I just realized that I've already got this thing filled in, so let me just delete that color. So if I use paint unpainted and I fill it in up there, you see how it filled in only that region, and then you can just drag over everything else and have it paint everything else. But you see what it does by default with color gradients is it repositions each one individually within that space. So what you can do instead is select one of these guys and then store that color gradient like I just showed you a second ago. Go back to paint, and I'll just use the regular paint because I've already filled the region in. And then within here I can use the stored color gradient, and then I can just paint all three of those, turn off show strokes, and that's what my final one looks like. So if I needed or wanted to have an invisible stroke that I use as a boundary for painting, super easy to do that. And then you can always come in here and adjust the way the shape of these strokes. You know, maybe I want to make it curved like that. Maybe I want to drag this one up quite a bit more so that I'll see it. You know, like whatever you want to do there, you can kind of play around with that. And And if you need to repaint anything, you can always adjust where the strokes are first, and then you can kind of come in here and remove the color on it and repaint it. And even though I sort of deleted all the color, because I still have that stored color gradient in there, I can still go back to paint unpainted and then just drag over that whole region, and you see how that does something really nice. I did get a little bit of an extra thing here, so if you do get overlapping regions like that, you can always select your strokes and then do a flatten. So if I come in here, then this one is flatten. And then what it does is it will create individual boundaries for overlapping pencil strokes so that you can very easily just remove them. So there we go. Now I've got my character drawing set up. So you can see how easy it is to work with the drawing tools in Toon Boom. It's really a combination of using your shape tools, the contour editor, and freehand drawing. So I'll stop this week's tip of the week here, and then next week we'll continue along by finishing to set up the character rig on this character, as well as doing some animation on it. See you next time.